Hello, everyone. Welcome to Grid Live Pre-Race. I'm Joe Samaniego, and with me we have Emily Sharp. Emily, you got a busy weekend. You got a watch-along party coming up later on.
Yeah, I do. Thank you so much, Joe. So I am going to be having to rewatch our races that we're covering tomorrow because I'm going to be at Downey Nissan in Southern California tomorrow. I want to invite all of our Southern California viewers to come join me for a free watch along for the GT4 series. It's going to be super fun. If you are a fan of Nissan, Z's, the community that's there, come get some coffee, some really super cool cars, and some really awesome vehicle simulators. So it's going to be a super fun event, kid friendly, and mix up your Sunday race day by coming enjoying it in person. The series is going to be at VIR tomorrow, so we're going to get a group together here in Southern California to watch along and cheer on the series. So if you're free tomorrow morning, come join us in person at Downey Nissan.
And link in the video description for all our viewers in the California area. And of course, anytime you get race fans together watching along, great opportunity to make friends, meet colleagues, expand your network, especially get more opportunities in the motorsports community. And of course, a lot going on. Of course, Joshua Birch right now has his watch along for Formula E. So we're following that. This is a big weekend of racing before the Olympics kicks off next weekend. And of course, we're going to take that nice little break. This is the last time we have 5 series or more in the grid ranking running. A big thank you to calling the show, Mark, Robin, David, Matthew, and for investing in the grid network each and every month. You too can invest. Robin's name and goal, she doubled her amount she's investing into us. It's helped us stay on the air for such a long time and continue to stay on the air after the Olympic break. And a one-time investment through YouTube Super Chat or Buy Me a Coffee is welcome. You could give anyone on the air or a specific member of the team cup of coffee, YouTube Super Chat. Just drop their name in the video description. They'll thank you on the air. Simplest way to support us, hit the bell icon, subscribe to us right here on YouTube. Emily, let's get started with Formula One. McLaren, Lando Norris, they were the fastest in all 3 practice sessions. Oscar Piastri was second fastest in the last practice session before qualifying. Many believing we could see that McLaren front row. Sure enough, qualifying rolled around. We had a little bit of rain, but still everyone went out on the soft tires. And at the end of the day, it is what we saw, a McLaren front row with Lando Norris on the pole, Oscar Piastri second, Max Verstappen. He is in the second row, starting third with Carlos Sainz along with him. I have to ask you, does this feel like Lando Norris being the favorite to win at Hungary?
Wow. I mean, every weekend with F1 this season, it has gone to a very predictable feeling of us expecting to see a Max Verstappen sweep of pole and then the actual race itself. But McLaren is just looking so strong this year, and so many opportunities this season so far where Lando could have won the weekend overall. And he just continues to look stronger and stronger and stronger. And as a fan of F1, it's been a really exciting season that his name has been so prominent in our discussions of who is looking strong and who is going to be our pick, if you will, for the weekend. So I do think, based on what we saw, it is Lando's weekend to run away with. Never discredit Max. He's starting in the second row. He did end up not going out at the very last minute after that final red in Q3 because his team felt like they were not going to get much more out of the vehicle. So I think there's a story there. But my golly, those McLarens are just looking so quick. They're just looking so successful on the straightaways here in Budapest so far, and the downforce that they're able to project. So, wow. Curious on what your thoughts are, of course, Joe, but McLaren's looking fast.
McLaren's looking fast, and what was really interesting, as we saw in that post-qualifying interview when they talked to Max Verstappen, it seems like he is the one chasing dim. So I really got the sensation that Red Bull knows this is not exactly their strong. So this is not exactly their race weekend, that they are ones trying to catch up keep pace with the McLarens. And I feel Lando has to be the favorite. You're on pole. The only way he could really lose it is if it gets a bad start and loses a couple positions, or strategy goes wrong because something like a caution flag, safety car, and just being in the wrong place, wrong time. But if he runs a flawless race, I see Lando being the winner. One of the things it almost ruined everyone today was a little bit of the weather. We show sunny skies tomorrow, so that's not going to be an issue today in qualifying. A little bit of rain did play a little bit of a factor, but not overall. And one of the big things I got to say with this racetrack, a lot of first time winners have come from here, like Fernando
Mhm.
Alonso won here, first time Jensen Button. I know Lando Norris is going for his second win, but that's a driver that could potentially go out there, get the win. But we've seen some years where the races are just crazy. 2021, Ocon won after Valtteri Bottas got into Lando, causing that big pileup. We saw Max Verstappen last year. Talk about a change. He started 10th and came all the way to the front, just showing how dominant he was. This year, different story. Do you anticipate we're going to have more of that traditional Hungarian Grand Prix with little to no passing? Or will this recent trend occur and we're going to have an unpredictable race ahead?
Well, given to what the season has been so far, which is the theme is unpredictability, I'm going to go with we're going to have an unpredictable race. Qualifying itself was unpredictable with the early red from Perez into the late red with Sonoda. So I think, to your point, if Lando gets a good start, he really could run away with this thing and dominate the race. But we had unexpected rain this morning. We had lots of unexpected, between the Visa RBs getting into the Q3. Unpredictability has been the theme so far. Max going from 10th to win last year, certainly not many drivers could do, but he was able to pull off. So I think while I feel confident that Lando can be a favorite heading into this, I don't think necessarily it's going to be easy for him to do. And again, it's race isn't over until the 70 laps are complete.
70 laps tomorrow for all the drivers is going to be really interesting to see how this turns out. I think the big thing that could be a little bit of the unpredictable side is going to be what's going to happen with the Ferraris, Mercedes back there. I think that's going to be really some of the unpredictable racing between those two. But overall, I got to agree with you. I think unless we have a spread out field and no contact, I think going to be traditional Hungary. But if we continue what we've been this year, I anticipate Max Verstappen is going to go for a bold move to try to get that lead because he knows how important that is. And that could set a tone for an unpredictable race. So it'll be really interesting to see what happens now. Of course, some of the unpredictable circumstances, I mentioned Mercedes. George Russell, 17th place tomorrow. That is going to be a hard route to climb. One of the big things, he is starting behind Sergio Perez. We'll talk a little bit more about him and his continued struggles. George Russell said this mistake was on him. He came in to the pit road instead of staying out. There was concerns, well, maybe he didn't have enough fuel for another fast lap as qualifying ran out. What kind of mindset does George Russell have for this race? Is he just going out there to run his own race to see where he could go up? Top 10 or even top 5?
I think he's going to be very aggressive. I think going back to our last question, I think he potentially could cause some things because I think he's going to go off strategy compared to the rest of the field to try to make some moves up at the beginning. Certainly down in 17th is not where he wanted to find himself. I think the Mercedes garage also didn't expect to see one of their cars out in Q1. So I think he's going to be very aggressive. He is a driver that tends to come in every weekend, and a post-race interview will share that he felt like he had the win. While the rest of us may not have been able to see the same thing he was seeing from watching it on television. So I think he believes he probably has a car and a vehicle to get into the top 10, into the points. But I think, we're going to have to watch to see how the rest of the field looks. Everyone at the beginning of Q1 was kind of setting their own personal best. So it was a really competitive field. And then, of course, we got the weather and those reds that impacted the rest of qualifying. So I think he's capable of getting into top 10, but we're going to have to see what the rest of the field does.
The rest of the field is going to be really tricky for George Russell to handle, especially as passing has been one of the more difficult things in this track. One driver that's I think is going to be difficult, but at the same time, George Russell might be able to get around just because I don't feel like he has the confidence like he used to. Sergio Perez, starting 16th, one position ahead of him. But what's going on with Sergio Perez? I gotta say, the last time we saw him qualify in the top 7, Miami, back in early May. Since Miami, his best finish was 7th in Austria. He has 2 8th place finishes at Imola, Spain, but 3 finishes of 17th or worse. And looking at the driver's standing, depending on what happens with Sergio Perez, he could fall behind George Russell and Lewis Hamilton in the standings, relegating him down to 8th. Has Perez lost confidence in himself, and how much longer can Red Bull wait for him to come back?
Yes, he has lost confidence in himself. How can you not, even the most brilliant person in control of their mind, how does it not affect you at all that this is happening and that it feels like it's just kind of spinning out of control and you can't get your grip back on how you are performing? I think there are several storylines happening this year in Formula One. I think the unpredictability of there's not a clear cut winner that we're talking about going into every race weekend. I think the strength of McLaren is another one. And unfortunately for Red Bull and Sergio Perez, I think this is another story. It is just not necessarily shocking to see that this is happening to a driver, but I think this is shocking to see the lack of response from Red Bull, who is notoriously an aggressive team who will, the second things are looking shaky, replace those drivers. Of course, Gasly Album replaced for less egregious performances, in my opinion. And Christian Horner seems to be sticking by Sergio Perez. I think it's interesting that Perez continues to have the narrative of I have a contract. So like there's no discussion of where I'm going. While we continue to speculate, and Helmut Marko earlier this weekend had made comments that yes, his performance is absolutely going to impact, decisions made surrounding him. And it's not just coming down to a contract, you have to deliver. It's not just him being outperformed by other manufacturers. An unfortunate stack that I've been seeing the past couple of weekends is Nico Hulkenberg in the past 2 races have outscored him in the points compared to, Sergio Perez in the past 6 races. So a lesser engine is now outperforming him. But the damage that he is racking up for this team to have to go back and spend money and repair, it's going to impact not only his vehicle, but now we're dipping into the Max Verstappen, potential upgrades with the money that they're having to spend to repair Perez's car. So, oh my goodness, we are on the cusp of summer break, which is notoriously when we start getting silly season, really, really in the thick of it. But I can't imagine there's not going to be a response after Red Bull after this weekend.
If Sergio Perez does not score any points, I have to agree with you. I think there's going to be some response from Red Bull because you're now jeopardizing essentially the constructors if McLaren gets this 1-2 finish. The question, of course, can McLaren keep this up all year? I'm leaning towards yes, they can. So you need Sergio Perez to be up there towards the front, bring in points. If he falls behind Lewis Hamilton, which, let's be honest, before the British Grand Prix, we were thinking doubtful if he would win. He got that win. He got the confidence. George Russell could have easily been in the top 10 had he not made that mistake in qualifying. I think you have to say Red Bull we got to talk. We got to do something because we cannot just let you try to find your rhythm. Come on back. So it'll be really tough for Sergio Perez. I know he's been there a long time. He brings a lot of sponsorship money, loyal fan following in Mexico, of course. But at the end of the day, this is business. What have you done for me lately? And Sergio Perez has not done anything for Red Bull lately. Before we switch to INDYCAR, comment in the chat room from Spalding Media. If Nick Cassidy drops his championship in Formula E, would that be the biggest letdown in Formula E history? I would have to say potentially yes. Right now, the update, Nick Cassidy has gotten himself to 10th place in the race after starting 17th. So he is in points range. So he's trying to catch up, maintain that lead over Mitch Evans. Some big notables, though. Antonio Felix Acosta, who had a strong sweep in Portland, he is in the pits with damage after contact. So right now, Evans lead, Wehrlein's third. The way it's looking, it looked like it's going to be those three drivers. Jake Dennis a little too far behind, in my opinion, but he's still mathematically eligible for the championship. We'll be bringing more updates throughout the show as Formula E, they're on lap 8 out of 37. Emily, the other big race, IndyCar at Toronto. This has been on the counter for a long time. One of the races that I think a lot of drivers circle because this is a street course where if you could just have that good qualifying lap, you're very likely to be up front as long as it doesn't get too out of hand. Yesterday, Colton Herta, fastest in practice, followed by Felix Rosenqvist and Marcus Armstrong. Honda had the 5 fastest, and Santino Ferrucci in 6th was the fastest Chevrolet, and we didn't even see the Penske drivers until you had McLaughlin and Newgarden 9th, 10th. Alex Palou, the points leader, was 7th. But second practice, a little bit of a different story. Again, Colton Herta number 1. His teammate Kyle Kirkwood second. But Penske improvement with willpower, third fastest, ahead of Alex Palou. So I have to ask, now that we're approaching qualifying, is Herta the favorite for the pole? And what other drivers are on your short list for potential pole?
Yeah, and to your point, qualifying happening later this afternoon today. But Colton Herta, we've been talking about him. We've been talking about how he's been on the cusp of having really big moments and then taken out by unfortunate situations out of his control. He, was leading the Andretti effort for the championship for a period of time. And is seemingly trying, like, getting his rhythm back. Of course, last weekend at Texan, very strong basis. I do that we can kind of slot him into being a favorite drawn for Honda. I'm gonna go with another Honda driver, the next consideration for pole. But Honda's looking very strong this weekend, which is unusual because usually we're here and we're talking about Penske and Chevy. And I mean, again, a little biased towards Andretti Global, and Colton, given his season so far. So hopeful that he is able to turn it around and make something happen.
This will be a huge boost to Colton Herta's confidence if he could get the win from pole position, just prove like, hey, I can put together that good, solid race. Overall, I think Colton Herta, he is a good driver that can go out there, get to win. It just lacks that putting together that perfect race, sometimes pushing a little too hard. But I'm hopeful to see something different because if he could get this race win, that could be a new dynamic. Maybe a little too late for the championship, but if he could at least get himself up in contention, especially if the others have bad luck, that'd be a great effort. And Kyle Kirkwood, we talked about last weekend, he can't just be consistent anymore. He needs to step it up if he wants to be in the championship picture. What a great effort. Second fastest in the last practice session. So let's see what he does. One driver in the top 10 yesterday in practice, but he is out this weekend. Alexander Rossi. Rossi broke his thumb and is out the race. And surprise, surprise, Theo Pourchaire. He is back. He was in France when he got the phone call. Worked his way all the way to Toronto, Canada. So Theo Pourchaire, he'll be in Alexander Rossi's seat. Rossi, he only has a few races left with McLaren, of course, because next year he's out to ride. As Kristen Lundgaard, the winner of last year's race, is going to be in that seat. Pourchaire, of course, we all know he lost his ride with McLaren. There was some news this week about how that all went down. Theo Pourchaire even made a statement saying that the reported rumors were not true. Now here he is racing alongside his former teammate Pato O'Ward and the driver that replaced him, Nolan Siegel, in his old car. Do you believe Pourchaire is going to be auditioning for his second chance with McLaren?
Oh my gosh. I mean, just as much as McLaren has been a story in F1 this season, McLaren has also been a story in IndyCar, and not necessarily for the same reasons. It has been the driver swap of the year when it goes to Aero McLaren. And just we of course now have Nolan Siegel in the car, and Alexander Rossi's contract not being extended, then coming earlier this week, now to Alexander Rossi being out this weekend, and as you said, uh Joe Teo Pourchaire being back in the seat after a very surprising split. Of course, that story was kind of going around the motorsports community, and very interestingly, he responded to it yesterday. Tony Kanaan, who is very much an integral role with Aero McLaren, responding back to Teo Pourchaire, saying, we have great things in the works for you, which I thought was interesting before we got the announcement that he would be slotting in to drive that car this weekend. So what can you be thinking if you're Pourchaire? I mean, obviously you want to leave on positive, positive feelings between the organization and him in case there is any opportunity. And given how quickly they have been swapping drivers and signing new drivers, certainly there is always a potential for him to be slotted in if one of these other drivers are not performing. I would say next year at this point, I hope on behalf of that organization, they're not going to be switching too many more drivers. Of course, Rossi's out with a broken wrist, so that is going to take a couple of weeks to recover, even if you have the best surgeon in the world performing that for him. So hopefully we get more of him this season. Such a strong start to his season for him, and IndyCar career. I got the opportunity to see him in Long Beach where he finished 11th. So he has great potential, which made it feel so even more surprising that he was being replaced. But you of course follow Formula E much more real ritualistic than I do. Do you think there's an opportunity for him in that series next year if IndyCar doesn't happen?
I was honestly going to bring that up. Like, yeah, I think with Theo Pourchaire, there is that Formula E seat. Now, I know it's not the exact same. You went from Formula 2 championship, potentially F1 to IndyCar, but you're with McLaren. You lose your ride. You're still with McLaren, but you're not in a Formula E seat. But right now, Formula E, Sam Bird, Jake Hughes, they're not exactly having that great of a season. In fact, Sam Bird, first lap issues, so he fell back. It's going to be really interesting to see if that's a role he's willing to take, and that's why he wants to keep this good relationship. And really, that's, I think, the one main option, because I don't see Theo Pourchaire making the crazy move to Extreme E, the off-road series that McLaren's in. I just think that's way too different of a racing discipline for him. But the Formula E route could be a good opportunity. And then, of course, if he just has a really good race weekend, he might still be trying to say, hey, if there's a team out there like Rahal Letterman Lanigan Racing, if there's a team out there that's willing to pick him up or just have him on that list of we need a substitute driver, he'll be there. I think he has along the line, so he is definitely going to try to go out there, have a good race weekend. If he could get a solid finish, I think that'll just bring a lot of confidence back up for him as well, too. Now, one driver, keep on the theme with McLaren, Pato O'Ward, 12th fastest in practice. And I have to say, the championship hunt seems to be between him, Power, and of course the points leader, Alex Palou, who leads the standings. Pato O'Ward won Mid-Ohio in a great race that showed the strength of him, that team, bringing the fight to Alex Palou. They are second in Iowa. Nobody could beat Scott McLaughlin that first race. But then the next race, sixth place, well, that looks fine, except Palou was second and Willpower was first, the winner. Now he is slower than Power, Palou, the two ahead of him in the point standing. Do you sense maybe the momentum from Mid-Ohio is starting to lose steam with Pato O'Ward and the McLaren team?
I I think the steam is always from within, right? And I think sometimes with O'Ward, it's hard to predict how he's going to perform given practice so far. He can look really strong in practice and then um, not deliver as equally as strong in qualifying, or vice versa. He will have a mid or average performance in practice and then like put it on pole. So I think it's unpredictable to see how he's going to perform. Of course, he comes from that background of being stronger at the street courses, at the road courses, and has found his strength in ovals as he has continued to race in this IndyCar series. I think it's going to come down to how he performs today and if he can get into fast six and it's unpredictable at this point. I do think that the he needed Mid Ohio. Had he not taken that win, I think his approach to the remainder of the season would be completely different than what it is. I think he is an arrow and still very much in a championship. If you get a podium and stay in the hunt, I think that it's very much going to be a different, hunger and fire the remainder of the season. If he finishes lower than podium, I think it's going to be a bigger uphill battle for him for the remainder of the season.
Yeah, it's just going to get harder and harder if he cannot get those podium finishes and you have Power, Palou. Even if they missed a podium, I feel they're so good at being at least in the top five. For Pato O'Ward, he has to step it up, and they have the capacity to do so. We saw that at Mid-Ohio. Mm-hmm. This is not the time to start losing confidence, doubting yourself as a team. This is the time to definitely hit the nose, grinding, and just keep working at it. And I think that team has the potential to do that. And of course, we'll be following everything with IndyCar at Toronto this weekend. Before we get into the NASCAR Cup Series, another update from Formula E. This race is just gone. It is physical. Nick Cassidy, he is down to 12th after attack mode and hard contact with Jake Dennis, who, of course, mathematically was still eligible for the championship, but really he needed everybody to have bad luck. Sebastian Buemi leads Evans and Wehrlein, your top three. So right now, it's looking like Mitch Evans will leave with the points lead with Pascal Wehrlein second, Nick Cassidy third, but all less than double digits apart projected. So this championship could come down to the last race. Antonio Felix Acosta, he is out of the race after that contact. He is scored 21st, so his championship efforts are done after a strong second half of the season. Jake Dennis right now, ninth place with the fastest lap, but I think he's just a little too far behind to make any effort in the championship. Now, got to say, let's go over to the NASCAR Cup Series where they're back at Indianapolis Motor Speedway, and it feels really good to see them and the Brickyard 400 again.
Yeah, absolutely. And the Brickyard 400 has returned. And Joe, I know you and many are excited about the return of this event. However, let's dig into it and be a little honest. Not too long ago, people said NASCAR shouldn't be racing here. So what makes this return to the Brickyard different from the last few visits on the 2.5-mile oval?
I believe part of it is that old saying, you don't realize how much of a good thing you have until it's gone. And I felt once the Brickyard 400 was gone, people realized, okay, the road course is just not the same. We saw some surprising physical racing in the road course years, including AJ Allmendinger winning it. Last year, we saw Michael McDowell just dominate this race. But now the 400-mile oval race is back. And I got to say, one of the big things I'm really excited about, Emily, is seeing this generation of car. The past generation of cars, it just was not cutting it. It just seemed like we were just not having that great of quality racing like you did with the prior generation car, where you had side by side racing consistently throughout the field. The other thing I feel is a little bit different now with the generation of car, the sense of optimism. I think a lot of folks have now forgotten about what happened with the tire fiasco, NASCAR, and the Brickyard 400 saw a caution flag every 10 laps, little to no racing. So I am hopeful that what we're going to see is essentially a Brickyard 400 that's going to have great racing, side by side racing. We're going to see plenty of passes. I'm hoping we don't see what we saw the last couple of Brickyard 400s, where we had these crazy overtime restart after restart with crash after crash. We were getting to racing under the sunset at Indianapolis Motor Speedway, which looks great visually, but when the race is supposed to finish an hour earlier, it's like, what are we doing? So I think the optimism is there. One of the big things I'm really just looking forward to is just seeing what's going to happen with qualifying, the racing, and now as the stage breaks, how that's all going to play in with the race itself.
Yeah, and we're always optimistic for a great race with lots of passing. It certainly makes things ever so more exciting. So yesterday, the NASCAR Cup Series drivers did get to practice, and Tyler Reddick was the fastest. Last week's winner, Ryan Blaney, and runner-up Denny Hamlin, the top three drivers. Joe, will we see the same drivers from Pocono up front at Indy again?
Potentially, that's what it looks like, and that was something I was curious about last race weekend. Was we saw who was up front at Pocono. With the past generation cars, I felt like it was very much, if you're up front in Pocono, you should be up front at Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Tyler Reddick, he was up front towards Pocono with Brian Blaney. So it looks like we have the same trend going on. What I'm really curious about is seeing what some of the other teams, especially in the Toyota camp, could do. Ty Gibbs did not exactly have that great of a practice, but this is his first time in a Cup Series car in this oval. Same for Bubba Wallace as well, too. Or excuse me, mainly Ty Gibbs. We got several drivers that are making their first start at the Brickyard 400. I'm looking at those drivers making an effort to try to get up there towards the front in qualifying, because they have the equipment. They ran well in Pocono like Ty Gibbs until his engine blew. Bubba Wallace, I'm curious to see if he could get up there in the top 10 as well, too, and stay up front. Tyler Reddick's his teammate. They get the support from Joe Gibbs Racing. I don't see why he cannot be up towards the front. Hendrick Motorsports, all of them are looking fast, so I anticipate all of them to be up front. And I got to say, I think a sleeper pick, in my opinion, has to be William Byron in that number 24. He's been improving slowly. He got a little bit of a better race in Pocono. We were talking about a couple of weeks ago, where has he been? Just quietly there. I think this is a great race for him. Great opportunity to go out there, get a win, and show to everyone he's not missing. He's back, and he's going to be a championship contender. So those are some of the drivers are looking at. Penske, Blaney, Logano, I think they're going to be up to the front. I'm really curious to see what Austin Cindric will do here at Indianapolis.
Well, Brad Keselowski said that this is the return of a crown jewel event. Everyone will be looking at the quality of racing and the crowd level. This venue used to sell out, but the last few times the stand nearly was empty. Do you agree that the Brickyard 400 is a crown jewel event in the NASCAR Cup Series?
For a driver, I would say yes, because anytime you could win at Indianapolis Motor Speedway, especially the 2.5-mile oval, that is a huge deal. That is saying, I went to the home of the Indianapolis 500. I went there and I won the race, got in victory lane, because if you're racing at Indianapolis Motor Speedway, that's a big deal. You are in an elite level of racing. Even for IMSA, when they're going to be racing the road course, that is their big moment. You're at Indianapolis Motor Speedway. This is a racetrack where you could say, I've won at Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Because if you're there, you're in the top level, and everyone wants to win this race. The list of winners at Indianapolis Motor Speedway, especially the Brickyard 400. Some of the biggest names in NASCAR, some of the most popular names. Occasionally, there's that one surprise winner, Paul Menard, comes to mind. But this is a race that all the drivers want to win. They'll love to say, I won at Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Indianapolis Motor Speedway also does a good job of celebrating their history, their past. We saw Jeff Gordon's car from the first Brickyard 400 there. Richard Petty's car is also there when he logged laps as well. So they celebrate the history. To be part of that history as a race winner, that's something everybody wants to do. And I got to say this, while that's great for the drivers, it is, of course, people buying tickets that makes an event a big deal as well, too. If the Coca-Cola 600 or Southern 500 were not sellout crowds, if they were drawing a little smaller crowd, would they be a crown jewel race? They are right now. They are selling tickets. They are having good crowds. Indianapolis Motor Speedway, NASCAR, they do got to work together. And, okay, we got to bring the crowds back in for the Brickyard 400 because we know that drivers care about winning here a lot. They want to go out there, win, say they were the best that day, better than anybody else. But it just feels a little bit empty when the stands are empty. Now, granted, Indianapolis Motor Speedway's capacity is like over 200,000. So even you have over 80,000 fans in attendance, it's still going to look very sparse. But just get to the point where the fans, they see there's a better racing going on. They're coming out here. I know they have the Xfinity Series racing in the Oval too. I'm curious if that really brings that big of a difference, because I know a lot of people still want to see them back at Indianapolis Raceway Park. So overall, for the drivers, yes, this is a crown jewel race. They want to go out there, win it because of all the bragging rights of I've won at Indianapolis Motor Speedway. But if the crowd's not there, if the enthusiasm is just not there from the race fans, it just feels like there's a missing element. And that, I think, it makes it where, at least for the fans, they start saying, well, the Bristol Night is a bigger crown jewel, or there's other bigger crown jewel races. But I do agree, anytime you win at Indianapolis Motor Speedway, that is a crown jewel win.
Yeah, and I totally agree. I think the historical significance of that track is really what makes it so exciting and an honor to have the chance to race there. But at the end of the day, it's a business. And if it is not bringing successful ticket sales in, and that perception from the fans overall is not going to stand up to, the significance of the track, decisions are going to have to be made. Well, moving on for something that is historically significant to something that is currently happening right now. Of course, Joe, we have the Formula E race happening while we are on the air. The first race of the championship weekend at the ABB Formula London E Prix. The race started as we went on the air with 7 drivers in the champion, 9 points just earlier this morning. Nick Cassidy, the points leader, qualified in 17th, the lowest of the 7 left in that championship hunt. Joe, what's the latest happening from London?
Well, we got 10 laps to go in London right now, and Pascal Wehrlein, who came in third in the championship, is leading. Mitch Evans is second. He started on the pole. So this championship battle looks like it's going to be very tight, because in 14th place, out of point range, Nick Cassidy, the points leader, he is surely looking at losing the points lead, entering at a deficit in the last race of the year. Of course, Antonio Felix Acosta, he's out of it. He crashed out. Jake Dennis, he's having a decent run, but it's just too little too late. I think he's going to be out of it. So you're going to be down to these 3 drivers. You're going to have Pascal Wehrlein. If he continues to hold off, get the win, he is going to be up there. You got Mitch Evans. If he stays in second place, he could potentially still be the points leader, but it's going to be by like 1 or 2 points, because at that point, it's going to be very tight between those two. And Nick Cassidy, 14th place. As Spalding Media said in the chat room earlier, would this be sort of like the biggest letdown, the biggest moment where somebody had a championship and essentially lost it? If he does, I'm going to have to then say yeah, because I can't think of any other time a driver with the points lead for quite some time lost it on the last race weekend. And here's the kicker too. It's all going to come back to that first race in Portland. when Nick Cassidy had the lead with 2 laps to go, coming to the second to last corner, went off track because he just missed the curb in the prior corner, messed up his race, did not have a good second race. It looks like everyone's going to be pointing at data as like that was the moment it changed. And if Evans does not get this championship, I think a lot of people will be saying Jaguar lost this championship for the 2 drivers. So it's going to be really interesting to see what happens with this race. And of course, and we can't talk about who's going to win this race, but we could talk about who's going to win the other races and pick a winner. There's the standings right now. Matthew leads. Of course, with your correct guess from last week, you're up to 22nd. Bonus points for everyone outside the top 10 and the top 20. So there's still plenty of time to get in the top 10. Emily, starting with you, who is going to win the Formula One race?
Well, I just think that McLaren is looking very, very strong this weekend. I'm going to go with Lando Norris's second win with Lando Norris.
I think I've got to go with a McLaren driver too, but I'm going to say it's going to be Oscar Piastri. I think he's going to get his first win. It'll be really interesting to see what happens. Now, of course, we've done pick 7th place. This was introduced last year after Max Verstappen was just winning every race. Who do you think is going to finish 7th place in the Hungarian Grand Prix?
I think very similarly to you, Joe, I think fair to have that second place chosen because of how strong Max was performing last year. This year, I'm going to do a similar pick as you, and I think that those McLarens just are so strong. I think Oscar Piastri, he's going to be locked into that second place.
Gotcha. It's going to be really interesting what happens. I think I'm going to go with Lewis Hamilton just to see what he could do, have the momentum. Let's go with INDYCAR at Toronto. Who do you see winning this race?
I am very, very hopeful that we have a great Andretti Global moment, and it could be way too early to put all of my eggs in this basket, given that we've only had practice, but I'm going with Colton Herta. I think he has been on the cusp. He's been putting his vehicle in the right place. Last week in Iowa, not Texas, as I had said earlier, my brain has gone to a different time in the season. He was looking strong as well. So Colton Herta, that's our race winner in Toronto.
I think I'm going to go with a driver that almost won this race, but had a broken wing last year. I think he's going to surprise folks with qualifying and then have a good race, good strategy. I think Alex Palou is the man to beat at Toronto, but he's going to have to work, and especially he's going to have to try to beat Colton Herta. So that's going to be really interesting to see. NASCAR Cup Series at the Brickyard 400. Feels so good to say that. Who do you see winning that race?
Again, it just unpredictability given what has happened in previous years with restarts. But I think we've had a strong outing so far with Tyler Reddick. I'm going to go with him as my winner.
Ooh, Tyler Reddick, that'll be a big win for him in his career. I'm going to go with a Chevrolet driver, a Rick Hendrick driver, the driver that finished the Indy 500 this year but could not start the Coca-Cola 600. I think Kyle Larson is going to win this race, and he's even running the livery he should have ran that day. So it'll be interesting if he could do that. Formula E, race 2. Right now, Formula E has 7 laps to go, and still Pascal Wehrlein, but now Gunther got ahead of Mitch Evans. So that could be, or actually that might be a scoring error. No, that is what happened. So craziness going on there. The championship is going to be on the line. Who do you see winning the race?
Oh, gosh, Joe. I think, how many laps do we have to go now at this point?
6 laps to go now.
6 laps to go. And who is our leader currently? I don't have the live stream up like you do.
Pascal Wehrlein is the leader, and he will be the points leader by a few points now. So.
Well, 6 laps to go, a lot could happen. I don't feel like I want to say Pascal because there's so much that can happen in 6 laps, but for the for the exercise of what we were doing, I will say him.
Pascal Wehrlein. I'm going to go, especially since this is looking like it's going to be a physical race and it's going to all come down to the championship tomorrow. I think Mitch Evans, I think he's going to get it and potentially claim the championship, but right now it's projected he'll be 8 points behind in the championship if he finishes where he is right now. And this is going to be another nail biter of a championship effort. Supercars are also racing race 2 later tonight. I'm going to go with Chas Mostert. He got the first race win. I think he's going to make a sweep of the weekend. And of course, tomorrow we're going to recap all the races and whoever is the Formula E world champion. Emily, I know you mentioned earlier, but for all our viewers that may have tuned in late, you're going to be at a watch along party. Can you tell everyone about it?
Absolutely. So if you want to unwind early in California time tomorrow morning from a nail-biting Formula E race this evening, come join us at Downey Nissan for a GT4 racing watch along. If you are a Nissan Z fan or an owner, Z, you will get VIP parking to the event. Super cool cars, awesome racing, delicious snacks and coffee. And I've been told some of the coolest, most thrilling vehicle simulators to try out. So if you are in Southern California, you want to get together with our incredible motorsport community and what's in that.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. Encourage everyone. Link in the video description. And of course, be sure to subscribe, hit the bell icon so you don't miss any of our programs coming up this weekend. And of course, Grid Encore on Monday. Ben and Brand going to have to recap a lot of going on at Indianapolis Raceway Park and Indianapolis Motor Speedway with the Xfinity Series. You don't want to miss that. Grid tonight, the latest news, especially, and we already talked about, if Sergio Perez does not get points this weekend, he could be on the hot seat. Would Red Bull respond in some way with some big news? Subscribe. Don't miss any of our programs. Colin the Show, Mark Robin, David Matthews, thank you for investing in the Grid Network each and every month and catching up on the chat room. Adams picked Lando Norris for the win. Russell, Scott McLaughlin, Supercars Race 2, Will Brown, Denny Hamlin, and Mitch Evans. So it's going to be really interesting to see what's going to happen at the race weekend progresses all weekend long. For Emily Sharp, I'm Joe Samaniego. Thank you for watching today's program. We'll see you next time and enjoy the races.